Carroll is my name. I'm the president and CEO of Leadership Greater Hartford, and will be for 7 more weeks or so. And I get to serve as your moderator today. Thank you. Welcome to the second in our series. Today's webinar is entitled Competence Redefined, Your Top 3 Levers in the New Now. And Achim Nowak is our featured presenter. And I must tell you that we've known Achim for quite some time. And he is one of the premier speakers in America, and certainly a superlative executive coach. And you'll get an idea why he is so highly regarded and why it was that we wanted to bring him back to Hartford. He came to us 7 years ago and did an in-person visit. Was such a big hit that when we wanted to put this virtual series together, we immediately thought of Achim. Let's go to the next slide and I'll walk you through how we're going to participate today. Here are the norms. We're going to ask that you turn off your camera so that we can keep more of the focus on our speakers and less on the audience. It will be helpful to everybody if we can do that. You'll all be muted because we have nearly 300 people registered today. We can't all be talking at one time. And in fact, we're only going to allow conversation from the audience through the chat room. So you'll all be muted. If you do have a technology issue, go to that same chat feature and connect with Leadership Greater Hartford. Someone from our team will provide you some technical assistance. And you can change your affiliation, your pronouns, anything you'd like, even before we get started, so that we can reference you in the way you'd like to be referred. Next slide, please. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, so a little bit about the chat room. You'll find it down at the bottom of your screen. It's bordered in red there. That is the way in which you can ask your question or possibly share an observation or a piece of information. We would like to have that be part of the conversation in the second half of our webinar. So just drop it in that menu and send it over to Leadership Greater Hartford, and one of our team members will be able to share it during the second half. Next slide, please. Okay, so we really would, I think for your viewing pleasure, click on the center box when it's time to listen to Achim. That way he'll show up, he'll be more present for you on your screen. So click on the center box to collapse the window. The next slide. During the program, we'll be showing a PowerPoint presentation which will inform and complement the words that Achim will be offering. We highly recommend you use the side-by-side mode during that time. And the next slide, please. This series is brought to you in part by our 2020 visionary sponsors. And we call them visionary sponsors because they had the vision at the beginning of this year to sign on and support all of the things that we are doing this year at Leadership Greater Hartford, including series like this one, which we could not have even imagined. But our visionary sponsors did. And because of their support, we're able to bring you this series at no cost to you. I should add, we're also being able to provide this series at no cost because of the generosity of our featured presenters, including Achim Nowak today. So the next slide, please. A variety of ways you can connect with us via social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and help me out. The fourth one. Instagram. Thank you. Finally, let's move on. without further delay, I want you to hear from, as I said, one of the premier speakers in all of the land, a tremendous author, a fellow who on a weekly basis inspires me and other members of the Leadership Greater Hartford staff with these incredible words of wisdom that come out, I think, at 6 a.m. every Monday morning. You will want to sign on if you are as inspired by this presentation as I know I will be. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Achim Nowak.
Well, thank you so much, Ted. And hello, Hartford. It's really fantastic to be with you. I have these truly wonderful memories. Yeah, here's my first slide. I have these truly wonderful memories of my visit with Leadership Greater Hartford 7 years ago, as Ted mentioned. This photo and the number one, for me, exemplify the great community spirit that I felt back then. So when Ted invited me to take part in the Leading in the New Now series, I immediately said yes. But first, I have to make a little confession. Sometimes I get a little tired of the word leadership. It has been thrown around and battered and misused so often. Know what I mean? I feel like I have heard the same familiar leadership words a million times before. And after a while, they all start to ring hollow. They begin to sound like cliches to me. So I feel a little funny saying this. I have written 3 books on personal leadership, but I don't wish to perpetuate meaningless leadership jargon. So my hope is that together we will rediscover the meaning of leadership language that we have known for a long time. Competence is a word that I love. And this is one of the unexpected rewards of our collective coronavirus experience. Competence matters. Competence succeeds. We cannot fake competence in the midst of a global pandemic. Now, all of us have witnessed some horrible leaders in the midst of our economic shutdown. Their incompetence has been magnified in this emergency situation. And we have seen some really inspiring ones. Those whose competence thrives under adversity. This is Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, widely acknowledged as being the most competent head of state in the world these days. And not surprisingly, a woman. The great ones show us so clearly what leadership competencies matter most right here and right now. Now, more about Jacinda later. So many individuals with no formal title have stepped up and shown extraordinary initiative and leadership to meet the demands of the current moment. So as I share with you the 3 most critical competencies we need to succeed in the new now, please consider this. These competencies apply to you if you are a senior executive in a big global enterprise. They equally apply to you if you own a small business or are a solopreneur. And because leadership begins and ends with the small choices you and I make every single day, they apply to every one of us, whether we hold a formal leadership role or not. So I want to cover just a couple of quick logistics items before we dive into the content. One more note, Ted mentioned this. He asked all of you to turn off your videos. I see a lot of you still on the screen. Would you kindly turn off your videos during the presentation? That would be really awesome. I will speak for just a little under 30 minutes. Our chat function will be open the entire time. Please pose any questions as they come to you directly in the chat. While I will not answer your questions while I'm talking, I cannot wait to answer them during the time immediately following this prepared presentation. So let's go. Does this visual right here look familiar? The most traditional definition of leadership goes something like this. We have a compelling vision and clear strategy for creating great business outcomes. We plan very carefully, and we have surrounded ourselves by an exceptional team that has the skill and drive to execute. Well, in a time when our world seems upside down, we no longer have the luxury of executing a strategic plan that we created in the fall of 2019. That plan has flown right off the roller coaster rails. So here is the first lever that will increase your chances of success during this time of disruption. Lever number one, make decisions. I want to wait for the slide to come up. Here it is, lever one, make decisions. What I'm suggesting, of course, is make decisions faster, a lot faster. About 15 years ago, shortly after I founded my first training company, I was hired by McKinsey Consulting to help them with an internal project. During this 6-month assignment, I got to take a close look at McKinsey's formidable set of diagnostic tools. It was immediately clear to me why McKinsey was considered the gold standard for organizational analysis. Funny thing is, every one of the large global enterprises that I have supported since then has at one time or another, while I was there, brought in McKinsey for an organizational diagnostic. And the top recommendation by McKinsey with every one of these global enterprises was always the same. Make decisions faster. I trust that the need to make decisions faster in the new coronavirus now is really, really clear. But I think McKinsey got it right all along. Even in the best of times, many leaders don't make decisions quickly enough. Now, I love data. One reason we often don't decide, however, is our conviction that we simply don't have enough data. We scramble to gather more data. We want to be absolutely sure that we're not making the wrong decision. We want to manage our risks. Big companies pride themselves on conducting a thorough risk analysis. I chuckle. While I appreciate risk management tools, traditional risk management is dead right now. We have no control over the many variables that impact our business outcomes in a pandemic. Any business leader who says she or he has that control is delusional. Now, at the core of our collective hesitation, of course, is our discomfort with risk. If you're uncomfortable with risk, tackle that demon now. If you work in a business that struggles with making timely decisions, tackle that demon now. If your internal processes prevent you from making decisions, tackle that demon now. Let's think about decisions that you and I make in our own life. When it is time to leave a job, for example. When it is time to go back to school. When it is perhaps time to leave a relationship. How long does it take you to make a decision? And why don't you make decisions faster? Imagine for a moment that you're on an executive team with 5 other people. You don't like to make fast decisions. Your 5 colleagues also don't like to rush the big decisions. On top of it, you are these 6 people who make all the big decisions in your business all the time. That's trouble. This trouble is amplified because you live in your own strategic bubble. This bubble is a world of profit margins and cash reserves and EBITDA. You are far removed from the everyday challenges faced by your frontline workers. You haven't actually talked to any of your business clients in a very long time. That is trouble. Take a look at companies where business decisions are made differently and less centralized. Self-management and open space are 2 operational and strategic planning methods where critical business decisions are made more holistically. There are examples of hugely successful businesses all over the world that integrate these methods. Here, decision-making happens bottom up rather than top down. And guess what? Decisions are made faster with instant buy-in. Intrigued? Check out Corporate Rebels, a collective of Dutch leadership renegades whose work I very much admire. The rebels are corporate dropouts who spend their time researching best new practices from all over the world. They have their pulse on fresh organizational and decision-making models. Now, whether you get your inspiration from Corporate Rebels or McKinsey, the guidance is the same. Make decisions faster. Make the best decisions possible based on the information available. Know the values that drive your decisions. Be clear about the assumptions you make and decide faster. Here's our second top lever in the new now. Act with a sense of urgency. Now, it's clear why this matters in a global pandemic, isn't it? Waiting a week or 2 to act on public policy costs lives. A lack of urgency literally becomes a matter of life or death. John Kotter is a Harvard-based leadership thinker who many of you may be familiar with. Kotter is the best-known Western thought leader on how to execute business change. You will not succeed, Kotter says firmly, if you don't create a compelling sense of urgency from the start. Here's an example Kotter likes to tell. A successful regional grocery chain was the very first in its geographical area to offer a broad selection of packaged goods, meat and produce, all with a level of service found only in its best smaller competitors. Customers loved it. As a result, over a time span of 40 years, the chain grew from 2 stores to 62. The size of each new facility increased, economies of scale grew, and margins were kept exceptionally high. Great, right? Well, then a younger and more innovative competitor showed up. Their stores were brighter, with wider aisles, a broader selection of fresher produce, and easier checkout. Amazingly, the successful chain practically ignored these developments. Their operation had become entirely inward focused. I'm about to show you a pretty cheeky image, but I could not resist. If you sat in the established company's management meetings, you rarely heard a discussion about the new competitor. The talk instead was all about the firm itself. Margins in store 42 were off budget. Renovations at one of the locations were coming along just fine, and so on and so on and so on. If you asked questions about the new competitor, how big it had become, its competitive strategy, its current growth rate, most executives did not know. So, start to create urgency by not protecting people from troubling data. Troubling data is a rallying call for doing things differently, for doing them better, for innovating. And why would anyone not want that? Have the courage to name the consequences of not acting with urgency. What if we do nothing can be a powerful motivator for an individual or team who have a myopic view of their business. What if we do nothing might have been a great question to shake up the inward focused team of our grocery chain. Urgency, let's be clear, is not panic. It's not anxiety. When we lead with fear-based anxiety, our top talent will run for the hills. Urgency is our ability to clearly understand a larger context with the help of data-based forecasting, and then calmly articulate this context with confidence to compel action. Urgency, says Stefan Tomke, a professor at Harvard Business School, will always be thwarted if we do not foster a culture of experimentation in our businesses. This is true regardless of the scale of your business. Here's a classic example from Amazon. Air Patriots is a game from mobile devices in which players defend towers from attack with a squadron of planes. When Amazon launched a new version of the game, the 7-day user retention rate dropped by a whopping 70%. Revenue fell by 30%. The team quickly realized that it had inadvertently increased the game's difficulty by 10%. Now, Amazon instantly shipped a fix. The developers, however, took this lesson one step further. What if they made the game even simpler? Might that produce larger gains in retention and revenue? To find out, they ran a test with 4 new levels of difficulty. The easiest version clearly did the best. When Amazon launched this new version, users played 20% longer and revenue increased by 20%. That's what I call acting with double urgency. An accident led to a surprising insight. It was instantly corrected. The insight then became the starting point for a new experiment. Instant win. Consider our coronavirus pandemic, the accident that you did not expect. And now we go to, yes, the urgency now slide. The urgency to act is felt in every pharmaceutical company right now as it rushes to create the first COVID-19 vaccine. The pharma urgency is supported by a clear allocation of internal resources that enable urgent action. Pharma is really good at this. It always is. So what about your business? What you do may be no match for such life and death urgency, but what would acting with more urgency in your business look like? Are you set up to act with urgency? What internal systems will need to change to fuel the kind of urgency that will create breakthrough outcomes for you? Lever number 3, strengthen accountability. This is in many ways the hardest one to talk about because, well, the mind goes, yeah, I know this one. Another confession. I have historically been pretty bad at accountability. Held on to people who underperformed for way too long. And then after months or years of simmering frustration, I would finally release them with resentment, of course. Companies use this crisis time to do talent house cleaning. Coronavirus is a perfect pretext of saying goodbye to the team member who has underperformed for you. I get it. If we need to release talent, that is the talent that goes. The tough part is many leaders are releasing the talent that they never fully held accountable because it was too much of a bother, because it took too much time. The price we pay is a culture of mediocre performance. The mediocre talent is not bad enough to release, also not important enough for us to invest in their development. They are just left to stay adrift in the sea of unremarkable performance. Or if we look at it differently, a sea of untapped potential right in front of our eyes. Accountability does not mean we constantly focus on people's mistakes. It is not controlling or micromanaging. It is not punishing someone for doing wrong. It is not finding someone to blame. Accountability does mean having the courage to call out limiting behaviors. It is engaging in regular and honest feedback. It is having the willingness to be an effective coach or mentor for a team member. And it is having the skill to do this well. Accountability is made a lot easier when you and I and the members of our team fully commit to whatever we are working on. It takes a bit of effort to bring a team to full commitment. It means listening to objections, dissension, and barriers to execution. Don't rush the commitment part. True commitment is earned. And true commitment is strengthened by very basic accountability tools. Have accountability partners when you work on a project. Accountability jumps by 95% when you have ongoing meetings or check-ins. I know not everybody loves meetings, with an accountability partner. Likelihood of the timely completion of a goal increases by 65% if you commit your goal to another person. In my line of work, this is standard practice. One of the things I do as an executive coach is hold you accountable. And because I hold you accountable, you are much less likely to show up for a conversation with me without having honored your commitments. That's how accountability works. Strength and accountability requires more frequent and purposeful communication. We're in the midst of this funny situational paradox right now. On one hand, we hear friends and colleagues talk about Zoom fatigue. I get it. Zoom communication, and I have lived on Zoom for many years now, requires a higher degree of focused attention. You and I are visible via close-up for an entire meeting. Everyone else is visible as well via close-up. We're more accountable for being fully present. On the other hand, there is research conducted by sociologists Zoltan Lipenyi and Tanja van der Lippe in the Netherlands. They study workers who work remotely, and their findings are a clear cry for more frequent communication. 80% of their remote workers say they would have better business relationships with more frequent communication. And 84% say workplace challenges or concerns drag on for a few days or more when colleagues do not see each other face to face, as in a traditional brick and mortar office. You want more accountability? Please communicate more often, communicate with purpose, have the conversations that lead to commitment. Use accountability partners. These are simple habits that help everyone to consistently do their best work. And isn't that what you want? Let's say hello to my friend Jacinda again. How is Jacinda faring with our top 3 leadership levers? Ardern acknowledges that she learned from what was going on in other countries in the world. It sounds obvious, doesn't it? Well, that alone is leadership. We sadly know so many leaders that don't ever learn anything from anyone. Ardern learned, and then she acted. She shut down her entire country on March 26, before there was a single death. That's what I call making a decision. Her decision was informed by a clear sense of urgency. When her health minister violated New Zealand's stay-at-home mandate by going for a walk on the beach with his family, she demoted him. That's accountability in action. And then Ardern melted hearts with a now infamous little speech the week before Easter. She addressed the children of New Zealand and talked about the importance of the Easter Bunny. Easter bunnies, she reassured the children, are essential workers. They come to visit homes, even in a shutdown. That's leadership. That's what it looks like. We have just examined 3 leadership competencies that are especially critical in our turbulent times. They're all about execution. Let me add a few words about the very human qualities of a leader that are just as important in this time of uncertainty. I'm not talking about virtue signaling. You see a sample of that on the slide here. Virtue signaling is the corporate messaging that says we are compassionate leaders. We have empathy for the hardships that our people face. Don't get me wrong, virtue signaling is great. I'm usually in favor of corporate compassion, especially when it is coupled with concrete policies that put compassion into action. But let's drop a level deeper. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson is one of the preeminent positive psychologists in the world. In her book, Love 2.0, Fredrickson steers our understanding of love from its big romantic connotations toward a deeper appreciation of the simple, everyday moment. Fredrickson coins the phrase, micro moment of love. Within micro moments of love, Fredrickson says your own positivity, your own warmth, and your own openness evoke and is simultaneously evoked by the warmth and openness emanating from the other person. Here is how a neuroscientist explains this. Yuri Hassan at Princeton conducts research on how 2 brains get into sync. He calls this process neural coupling. In his research, the area of the brain that shows coupling is the insula, an area linked with conscious feeling states. In other words, neural coupling is much more likely to occur when you and I feel a shared emotion. When my joy meets your joy, joy magnifies. When my love of others meets your love of others, a micro moment of love is born. I will end with a story of a micro moment of love from my own life. I had visited a good friend in Naples, Florida, and I was taking what we call Alligator Alley, which you see on the photo, to drive back to the east coast of Florida where I live. Hey, hold on a minute, I say to my friend Nikki, with whom I'm chatting on the phone, as I pull up to a toll booth right outside of Naples. I hand 3 $1 bills to the clerk in the booth. She is a cheerful woman of a certain age, wearing a pair of big, oversized sunglasses. You look like an Italian movie star, I say to her. Oh, don't I wish, she giggles, as she straightens my crinkled dollar bills. Maybe you are, I reply. Maybe you are here doing research for your next great movie role. My toll booth friend laughs out loud with unabashed joy. I find myself beaming with delight. Boy, Nikki says to me on the other end, you just made her day. As I pull off into Alligator Alley, I think to myself, no, I made my own day. My Tollbooth stranger and I created a micro moment of love together, and the good feelings reverberated with me for my entire ride home. That's what happens in a micro moment of love. So here's my invitation to all of us. Let's execute the big stuff really well. Let's make decisions faster. Let's move with urgency. Yes, let's hold each other accountable, shall we? And let us celebrate our humanity along the way. Remember that in the end, your pain is my pain. Your joy is my joy. So let's have the courage to create micro moments of love whenever we can. Let's do so boldly and courageously. Our world needs more love. Thank you so very much for your attention. My web information and email address are here on the screen. Ted and I will get this conversation started right now, but please feel free to stay in conversation with me after today, anytime. So Ted, my friend, I'm gonna throw it over to you.
I want to break into song right now, but my team would really be upset if I did. That was a lovely, lovely presentation, and I especially appreciated how you blend the macro picture with the micro picture. It doesn't matter where we are, who we are, what level we're in, we can exercise those micro moments of love all the time. And I happen to know it's pretty contagious. That's the sort of thing that does catch on. And even as we're working on the big picture, and there is a lot of things to do relative to the big picture. There are a number of questions I see that have come in. I have a number of my own. I'll defer mine because I'll ask those another time, Achim. But I'm going to ask a member of my team to choose one of these questions and put it out there for discussion.
Our
Hi,
first question.
Karen?
Go ahead, Karen.
oh, sure. Thank you, Destiny. There was a great question from Susan, I believe Susan Daigle from Florida. What first steps do you recommend to create buy-in and awareness for leading in the new now?
Thank you for that question, Suzanne. It's a funny time because there's pressure to make decisions really, really, really quickly, and some decisions you have to make quickly as the leader of a business. But what I've seen work really well is if, for example, in a traditional town hall, usually there are 2 or 3 people who are talking to people in the factory. I'm using factory format because I do a lot of work in manufacturing. But what if you spend half a day with the 60 or 70 people who are in that town hall, and you have a conversation where you let them do the talking? And there are different ways of structuring. I mentioned open space in my presentation, which is a fantastic way of coming up with strategic ideas that are generated from the 60 or 70 people that are there. If you never used open space, I urge you to find an open space facility to do it for you. But it's really, really powerful. And the common pushback is, well, that sounds great, but it's just going to take a lot of time. And what I challenge you to think about is if you give those 60 or 70 people a chance to talk, my hunch is basic strategy emerges organically. And on top of it, those 60, 70 people are fired up, they're committed, and they're really ready to go and execute. Awesome question. Thank you, Suzanne.
Well, thank you for that. And it relates to a question I had about how do you balance the need to act quickly and to make decisions fast with the growing experience many of us have that we need to engage people in the process and listen to multiple perspectives. There seems to be a tension. How would you reconcile that tension?
I'm not going to give you a neat, tidy answer because we could spend hours on that question. But I think the old system of 6 or 7 people making decisions, and the corporate term is let's cascade it down, And then we're surprised that nobody's excited by the decisions we made. It's not working. The evidence is everywhere. So I invite everybody who is interested in learning different methods. I mentioned self-management. I mentioned open space as a strategic tool, techniques like World Cafe. Just do some research and then ask yourself, which one of these can we experiment with? In the beginning, it's going to be a back and forth between some executive team decision making, but if you want ownership to drop down, you can't constantly make decisions for people who are your subject matter experts and who know what they're doing better than you do. It just does not work.
There seems to be an art form here and
Yeah.
a certain amount of experience going back and forth that might be necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Karen or Destiny, do we have another question lined up?
I do actually. Somebody would like to know if we could talk more about achieving commitment. What are the conversations needed to do so?
Let's say if I'm leading a team and my fear is that everybody is just sort of agreeing to stuff to get the stupid meeting over with, and a deeper conversation has to happen, my advice to you would be is play devil's advocate, ask tough questions, challenge deeper thinking, encourage people to talk about the things that could go wrong, not in the sense of being a party pooper, but in the sense of thinking realistically. And it's one of those paradoxes, where by taking the time to have a deeper conversation around commitment, execution will go a lot faster. If we don't have the conversation around commitment, it always breaks down in execution. So be realistic about how much time is needed and have the courage to ask the difficult questions. And it starts with you as a leader modeling that and making it safe for people to do that. There's a lot more, but this is just a high-level answer.
Terrific. Yeah, there are lots of leadership paradoxes, aren't there?
Yeah.
How about another question? Karen?
Yeah, there are great questions in the chat box, but this one I think is going to be rather interesting. Will the 3 levers matter if you're confused about purpose?
I'm going to give a really politically incorrect answer right now that refutes what a lot of people are saying. I come out of, my first career was in show business. I was a professional theater director and acting coach for 12 years in New York. I've always had purpose in my life. So I think we're over talking purpose these days, and purpose is like a new sexy term. For example, if you're the CEO of a manufacturing company making really good stuff, good product that helps people have better lives, I think that's enough of a purpose. I also do a lot of executive coaching in pharmaceutical companies. And I know sometimes folks there, because they don't have enough direct contact with the clients they serve, are removed from the purpose. But the purpose of what's done there is very, very clear. We're helping save people's lives. So it's good to articulate it, but for my money, we're using lack of a purpose as too much of an excuse for just doing a great job. But yeah, I'll take a good vision and mission. I think that's a good start.
Yeah. Thank you, Achim. How about somebody else?
Okay, I have a question from Rosita. What if key leaders lack accountability? If the key leaders lack accountability?
No, that really sucks. And again, I'm speaking from my perspective as an executive coach. And if there are organizational situations that you cannot change, I would say, and it feels funny to say this in a difficult climate, but have the courage to ask yourself why you are staying there. Let's say change the things you can, be clear about your sphere of influence. But if it's a highly dysfunctional organization with self-perpetuating bad leadership, have the courage to consider going elsewhere. 50% of the senior executives I coach are always acting as if they really want to be there and are job hunting at the same time. And I don't think that's a horrible mindset to have when we get too frustrated with organizational systems that we cannot change.
Thank you, Achim. We had another question from Rosemary, who asks, how can we evangelize the concept of people over profits? And from your point of view, is that the choice that we have to make?
I would make it a people and profits. And I would urge you to, if that mindset doesn't exist where you work, things don't change until we have champions for that mindset. So I invite you to think like, do we have internal champions right now? Or if senior leaders who make many decisions need to be influenced and enlightened, how can I educate them? How can I lobby? And I love the word lobbying. It has so many negative connotations. But what kind of conversation needs to happen? There are many, many examples of companies that are newer and more progressive that are figuring out how to do people and profit. And you just have the courage to tell the story. I'm also a believer in small experimentation. Sometimes if you have influence in a small subset of a company, if you can begin to change the culture there, it will be noticed and hopefully trickle up. That's where I would start.
Terrific. I also just want to remind the audience there have been questions about, can you repeat something that has already been said? Will the video link be made available? The answer is yes, it will be made available, and so you can hear and rehear all of what was shared previously. You know, another paradox that I've been challenged by is the recognition that sometimes you have to get really close to the problem and really mix it up with the people on the front line. At other times, it seems as though, as Ron Heifetz talks about, you have to go up into the balcony and kind of witness, observe what's happening. When do you do which one? Or do you somehow have to find a way to engage in both? What's your own advice in that regard?
Well, you're talking about the art of leadership, which is knowing what to do when. And you phrase it beautifully. One of the things that really strikes me is folks who advocate for creating a more entrepreneurial culture within large companies where more decisions are made in localized ways. It assumes that the people you have working there actually want to have more ownership. So some do and some really don't. Some are happy to just show up and do their job. So if you want that kind of culture change, on some level, the question comes up, do we have the right people who are culturally a fit for what we want this to be? So it's a fine dance. There's not a tidy answer. But if I had to choose, I would always choose involving more people in conversations rather than less. The less just not sustainable.
Yeah, you're just listening to your own voice sometimes can be very dangerous.
Yes.
Ted, I have a question from Anita and Stella. How do you make sure holding someone accountable doesn't feel like micromanaging?
I think a good starting point is to have a regular cadence of communication that's agreed to before we have challenges. It can feel like micromanaging, like when you go, oh shoot, so-and-so is underperforming and I'm going to really ride them a little bit. Another guidance I suggest for everybody who leads teams, let's say if I was leading a team and Ted was working for me, I would have a very transparent conversation with Ted. I would say, Ted, I don't believe in micromanagement. I believe in having the best possible talent and you do your thing. But I also want to know what's going on, which means if you have a challenge, I want to be able to help. So what would be a cadence of communication and check-ins that would work for you? So you see, we're co-creating our communication. I clearly mentioned my expectation, and that cadence can be different with different people, rather than everybody gets a monthly phone call or something. Is co-create the kind of communication that you need or want.
I liked your idea about accountability partners. It reminds me, often in our programs, we invite people to make commitments to something, and we remind them that if they write it down, that's pretty, enhances the chance the commitment will be made. If you share it with somebody,
yes,
it will enhance it further. Is that the power of accountability partner that you're talking about?
Yes, I mean, I'll give you an example from my own life. It's funny, I host these corporate masterminds for C-suite leaders, and I put people from different companies together, and we have this 3-hour conversation together, and people think that that's the most important part, and it is, but in between, everybody in each month is assigned a different partner from the group, and the expectation is that you talk to each other twice for 30 minutes, which is a very small commitment. But I know that those conversations with, we call them action buddies or accountability partners, are in many ways more important than the group conversation. And so there is if I'm going to use a corporate return of investment to your time by just showing up twice a month for 30 minutes, and you get to work out stuff with each other. It's really powerful, but it helps to institutionalize it. So again, if you like that idea as a leader, just say, I believe in this, and I love for us to try this in between our regular meetings, and see how it goes.
I see another question's come in from Ira Yellen. And of course, leaders need to accept responsibility, but there's also a time to pass leadership on to selected team members. Can you speak to maybe delegating authority or responsibility to others with whom you work?
It's such a wonderful question because it comes up in my coaching practice all the time, this question. And I think the hardest thing is to be clear with yourself about the assets that the person has who you delegate to. Because my job is to set you up to be successful and not fail. So I want to delegate stuff to you that you can succeed in. And if I want to delegate things to you consistently that I'm not sure you can succeed in, I don't want to micromanage you, but I want to mentor you and guide you so you can step up your game and develop and be successful. And that requires an investment in time, but the return and the reward for you will be just many times more than the time that you put in. But if we don't put in that initial investment and really switch, I call into the mentor role, that's a harder thing to do.
We're nearing the end of our time, and Karen or Destiny, I don't know if we have another question that you're ready to pose. I have
Yes.
one in case you don't. Go ahead, Karen.
So Achim, when you said co-creating a new culture, number one, I love that term. As a leader, and you're considering re-entry and bringing your folks back into the office, what would be one of the first things you would consider doing to letting your folks know there's a new way?
A lot of people that I know are rightfully, I'm going to use the term freaked out, that we all want to go back to the old normal. And there's lots of stuff rightfully on the internet says, well, the old normal wasn't that great. So what can we do differently? So a process that might be very helpful Like if you, Karen, are leading a process and let's say you have 15 or 20 people, say, this is the opportunity. We can do some things differently and better. But maybe let's identify, if you think back to habits and practices from before COVID-19, what are 3 or 4 things that we did really well that we want to honor and absolutely keep up? And then have the courage to say, if we could do 3 things differently, what would those be? So it's a transitional framework where we're not throwing out the past, but there's a power in just articulating what we did that went well, and you're co-creating it. And then I believe that as a leader, if there's something that's important to you, and say, this is something that matters to me, and I would like for us to honor this as well. So you don't have to forget about your point of view, but it merges with what's coming from the group. And it's all accomplished with your framing and how you set it up.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we're nearing the end of our time, and I love that last expression. It's a reminder to honor and hold on to that which worked before.
Yes.
Let go of the stuff that didn't so much. Embrace the new discoveries and insights and innovations that have come about in part because of this pandemic. It's been said, let's not waste a good crisis. And I know here at Leadership Greater Hartford, we've not been wasting that opportunity at all. And I suspect that's true of many of you as well. Achim, is there a final word you want to share with us? You've offered us many, many insights already. And we would be good if there wasn't, but is there a final message you'd like to share?
As you ask the question, I go back to the section of my presentation where I invite all of us to have the courage to risk more. I coach a lot of leaders who say to me is, I do really well when I'm prepared, but I'm not doing well when I'm not prepared. And I think the situation is saying, well, learn how to do well when you're not prepared, because that's where we are, right? And develop those muscles.
Yes, good. Thank you very much. My senior minister had a wonderful prayer that I'll just close with. Yeah. May we have enough courage to risk something big for something good. So whatever Beautiful. That's something good out there, let's focus on that and be willing to take a stand. Let's be willing to risk something. We do need to close at this point, but I would like to thank you again, Achim, for the brilliant presentation, Leandra, for your beautiful graphics, and for all of our visionary sponsors. Please pay attention to this slide, Brilliant Best. This is how you can get more of some of what we just enjoyed from Achim today. Very grateful for our visionary sponsors, and want to give you a heads up about our next time together through Leading in the New Now. It will feature Dr. Jessica Nicklin, and in a webinar that'll be sponsored by Express Strategies and moderated by our colleague Cara Fenn. Dr. Nicklin will be talking about achieving balance when balance doesn't even exist. So I hope you're intrigued, and I hope you sign on. It will be great to visit with you once again. I believe that's it. Till the next time. Oh, wait a minute, a couple of commercial messages. For those of you who have teenagers in your life, whether you're teaching them, whether you're parenting them, whether you know people who teach or parent teenagers, we have a wonderful series that kicks off on May 18th. We call it Speaking of Leadership, and it's being presented by our own Andre Santiago, our Vice President of Programs. We're very excited about bringing these 5 one-hour modules during the week of May 18th through 22nd, our small way of helping to address the education crisis going on right now while people are not being able to experience the way education has once been experienced. We hope to fill a gap and add something to the distance learning activity that's going on. And we have one more, or don't we? Oh, well, We don't have a slide on this, but do mark on your calendars June 23rd. We're going to be inviting everybody to a farewell gathering, so I can say thank you to all the people who've made my 35 years here at Leadership Greater Hartford so special, and it should be a fun evening. More details to follow, but circle your June 23rd calendar if you will. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you again, Achim and Leandra, for partnering with us to make this possible. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.